We are in the midst of a challenging week here at Transformation Church. If you are in the Thunder Bay area, you're probably aware of an incident that took place earlier this week. A man that's been coming to our church was arrested for a breach of his prohibitions. He's not allowed to be with children that are under the age of 16, and so he's been arrested and he's in custody. And there's a lot of emotions in response to this incident that took place. There's a lot of feelings of betrayal, and there's a lot of anger and people not fully sure how to process this and how to deal with it. It's actually going to be something we'll be talking about this Sunday. But in a general way, I just want to talk for a minute or two in this video about the fact that this is something that happens in churches on a fairly regular basis, unfortunately. I've myself grown up in the church and have been a part of several church communities where people in leadership have had serious moral failures. And the repercussions of that are that we tend to ask all kinds of questions. How could this happen? How could God let this happen? How could the leadership allow something like this to happen? And then some of the questions go more something like this. I knew this person and I could have never seen something like this happening. I'm sure that you can relate with a situation like this. And I want to read a few verses from Psalm chapter 55. King David went through something very similar. He was betrayed by a very close friend. And I just want you to see how he dealt with those feelings of betrayal through prayer. In Psalm chapter 55, starting in verse 12, it says, "If an enemy were insulting me, I could endure it. If a foe were rising against me, I could hide. But it is you, a man like myself, my companion, my close friend, with whom I once enjoyed sweet fellowship at the house of God, as we walked about among the worshipers." And then David goes on to talk to God about his anger towards this person. He actually says some things that sound really severe about what he would like to see done to this person. And I want to be very clear, Scripture gives us permission to deal with the emotions in our heart. If you've experienced betrayal, or if you've been with somebody who you've looked up to or been close friends with that has done something that you think, how could they ever do that? How could this ever happen? Scripture gives us permission to deal with our emotions. And it's so important that we deal with our emotions to God. Sometimes we're tempted to deal with our emotions with other people, and we're tempted to say, well, this is what I'd like to do. Or we're tempted to take matters into our own hands and go and try to do something. And I want to encourage you, if you're facing some of these emotions, to bring these difficulties and these emotions to God. There's actually, in other places in the book of Psalms, there's places where the psalmist, the writer, was saying things to God like, I want you to destroy my enemies. I want you to throw their children up against the rocks. Things that you're like, why is Scripture even saying that? But the important thing to know is that these people brought these emotions to God in prayer. And the way David wraps this up in verse 22 of Psalm 55, he says, "Cast your cares on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken." And there's so much hope when we cast our cares upon the Lord. So not all of our emotions are necessarily right, but all of them are very real. And so the best way to deal with them is to bring them to the Lord in prayer. And so I want to encourage you to do that and be praying for us this week as we face some of these things. And we're going to be facing it together on Sunday and talking about how we deal with this stuff before the Lord.